This is the Discuss Metal Podcast with Joel Bailey of Society's Finest. Hosted by Dan Terry. Presented by DiscussMetal.com.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Discuss Metal Podcast. My name is Dan. I'll be your host for this evening. And I mean, let's be honest, I'm pretty much the host every evening that you're watching this or listening to this or something. I'm there in some capacity, but you guys don't care about me. You care about our guest tonight, which is Joel Bailey, formerly of Society's Finest. At least I assume formerly of. Yeah, exactly.
It'll probably always at some point it'll probably be me and Josh till we're 90 years old.
There you go. Just keep the friendship forever. I mean, I'm definitely that way with my co-host. Him and I, every creative project that we do is.
We've been friends since we were 17, 18-year-olds. He was the best man at my wedding and stuff. We'll probably be those two dudes in the retirement home, annoying nurses and stuff.
There you go. Hey, little lady. I was in a band once, several bands actually. Yeah.
Check this out.
Yeah, check out my sweet licks.
Oh.
Well, so this was kind of a fun get together in that, it's got to be weird. I think I even put in the description of this video, I was like, it's always a weird feeling when you're listening to three random dudes on the internet talk about a band that you were in. And three dudes that, I mean, at least we try to be objective, but, sometimes the episodes lean positive, they lean negative, they lean somewhere right in the middle.
It's like I told you, I would much rather it lean more towards the negative. Because then, I know someone is being real, or you know what I mean? Because when people are blowing, you have so many people blow smoke up your ass their whole life, and when someone have you ever seen that interview with those kids when Oasis when Be Here Now came out, and all those kids are in line outside of, and they're like, oh, it's the best, and then there's that one kid who's like, yeah, I don't like it, it's just dad rock, more it's hilarious because all these kids are like, it's the best, and this one kid's like, yeah, nah, it kind of sucks.
But sometimes that one kid is just saying that just to be an edgelord or whatever it is,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Definitely have to strike a pretty delicate balance of I don't know, actually listening to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Listening to what you're actually listening. I don't know. It's hard to explain because I don't consider myself to be this hardcore music critic. I just listen to songs, and if I dig them, I dig them, and I try to explain why when I can put it into words, but. Yeah. You're ultimately trying to describe something that's indescribable. So that can be kind of rough from time to time. But like I said, we're not here to talk about me. And I always kind of start these interviews off kind of the same way, just getting a little bit of background. And I like these to be semi-autobiographical in that I always start off pretty simple with what got you into music, what got you into playing music.
Yeah, man. What got me into playing music was definitely Guns N' Roses. When I was a kid in New Orleans, I remember I was just part of this cadre of fans of metal at that time, and I remember it was Metallica and Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and I remember going to see Guns N' Roses live, and I just happened to be on Duff McKagan's side of the stage.
Yeah.
And watching, not only that, Soundgarden was the opening group. So this is before Bad Motorfinger, and Ben Shepherd played on the same side of the stage as Duff McKagan too. So for 3 or 4 hours, I was exposed to two phenomenal bass players playing really awesome songs. And literally after that moment, I was like, I want to play bass. I didn't want to play guitar. I wanted to play bass in a band. And that completely just destroyed my life.
Well, I mean, I think picking up bass, though, that's kind of I can play bass and I can be in any band.
Yeah. Well, the thing is so many people that play bass are they're the friend that either was just cool enough to they here, just learn these songs, or it was the guy that wasn't good enough to be the lead guitar player,
Right.
Very, very rarely is the bass player in a band someone that was I want to be a bass player. You know what I mean? Because most of the times those guys end up being dickheads that are in weird jazz things and you know what I mean?
Yeah, like a Les Claypool, not saying that he's a dick, but you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. You know what I'm saying? They're they're the guy that's too good for anywhere else. And with me, I always wanted to be like I said, I wanted to be Duff McKagan. I wanted to be Simon Gallup. I wanted to be that dude. I mean, that was, I wanted to be Peter Hook. That was growing up, the bass player was like the raddest dude on stage. I don't want to be the guy wanking on the solo and stuff. I want to be the guy holding down the low end that was just like looked awesome. You know?
Right. Yeah.
That was it.
The guy that always looks like he's throwing down.
Yeah. And plus I was tall. Like you can't be tall and be a guitar player.
So what was your first band?
Okay. So my, my first band in high school, it was called Alcatraz. Yeah. High school metal band. Of course. Like,
please
Alcatraz.
tell me you were all like, we're Alcatraz and we are about to rock.
We never played a show. It was just
we were
just like, we just played in garages, and then all of our friends would show up with like, you know, like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like party essentials. And like, you know, we would just all be in a garage, just hanging out as like 17-year-old kids and stuff. You know? But that was my first band, Alcatraz.
Nice.
Yes.
So Alcatraz didn't play any shows.
No.
Okay.
Well, why did we need to? We had garages and like, you know, light beer. I mean,
true. Yeah. I mean, that's the way to go. I mean, I would say probably my first 3 or 4 bands didn't go anywhere. I
think most people are like that. Like if you're too ambitious, then you need to work out all those kinks first. Yeah.
Well, I was a lead singer, so I don't think ambitious is even the right word for it. It's just assholishness.
One of my mini cats.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I definitely think that it's interesting how you get into that garage, because I remember being in a garage with like 3 of my friends, my co-host Joe included, who actually just left us a comment. I remember he would play guitar, and then I had to scream out of this like shitty guitar amp. We plugged a microphone directly in, like no mixer or anything, just like straight in. It was like all feedback, all noise. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, learning all those the little things. That was, I guess, one of the good things about being the bass player. I just had to show up with a bass and an amp and be like, I'll figure all that out.
Right. I got my life put together here. How'd you end up getting a hold of or getting in with Josh and Society's Finest?
Okay, so that was like a little further down the line, like in my musical air quote career, you know, because I'd already been like touring and done a bunch of other stuff. And I remember I'd known Josh since I was in high school, and just things kind of, we were just like, let's start, like, because you got to remember, like in the mid 90s, like mid to late 90s, like the whole concept of like Christian metal / hardcore / metalcore / punk, whatever, that whole scene really just like exploded. And it was, you know, you had established, and I don't know who's listening, but whatever. Like you had established Christian alternative or / rock record labels that were trying to sign these bands like REX and things like that. And then you had, 6 Feet Deep was on REX, you know, which is hilarious because like my old band was also, it was weird. Like my old band was on label mates with 6 Feet Deep, which is such a trip to me.
What was the old band? Sorry, I didn't mean to skip right to.
I was in like the pop band.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
So like, it's weird. We were like label mates with like Circle of Dust and like 6 Feet Deep and stuff, which is so weird,
right?
Know? And then, of course, you know, then Tooth and Nail and 5 Minute Walk, and of course, you know, like as the '90s went on, you had a bunch more like indie labels sort of jump on the scene. You know, of course, it's hilarious to think now like we consider those indie labels when like the guys that we, you know, like REX, they're definitely indie. You know,
oh yeah,
totally. You know, by today's standards. Anyway, so like, you know, Josh and I, we'd known each other for a long time. And after I've kind of been in music for a while, we're just like, we saw, you know, like we were fans of the scene. We lived in Dallas and there was nothing like that at the time. All that we had a couple death metal bands that were fairly popular here, around here and stuff like that. And they'd gotten some write-ups. We had a good friend of mine, Sean, he was in a band called God Fear. Have you ever heard of them?
Sounds familiar. I used to be into all of those bands. I used to have.
Okay, so they were fan-freaking-tastic. They were basically Pantera, like literally note for note, like the whole thing. They sounded exactly like Pantera, like in a really good way, not in a cheesy way. And like I remember seeing them play live and just being like, you know, just like completely blown. Like they would open up for like Living Sacrifice or who were some of the other bands like back then? Die Happy, you know what I mean? Like that time period.
Oh, okay.
And like they would always open up because they were like the band around here, and they were fantastic. They were just unbelievable because they were so good. And of course, you know, whatever, they broke up. But like anyway, so but the hardcore / punk / metalcore thing, like my friends and I, we've been listening to that, and we've been kind of brought up in that scene. And all of a sudden, here's like these, Christian bands that were doing that sound. And we're like, dude, let's do this. Let's make something happen. And so like Josh and I just basically literally like, we like willed ourselves to have a band. We like, I wasn't a guitar player. I was a bass player. I've always been a bass player. I couldn't find a guitar player. So it's like, I don't care. Like I'll play guitar. And then I taught my friend to play all the songs on bass live.
That's funny. Yeah.
For real. Like, cause we were just like, we're, you know how everyone is at that age. You're like, we're wasting time, burning daylight. We got to do this. And we just started this band. And as we got better musicians in the band, we kind of grew and stuff like that. But because in the very beginning, it was really just me and Josh and whoever we could con into playing shows with us.
Right. Okay. So whenever we were like, yeah, this band the lineup is whoever showed up.
Right. Literally, you were right.
Okay.
Like when you said that, I kind of cracked up because like basically, because I mean, like it was so, especially with drummers, we went through probably like 8,000 drummers because like literally like people just like move and we'd be like, oh, I guess, freaking dude is gone. And like, so let's get another drummer. And like, we would just like beg, borrow and steal drummers, and it was hilarious.
Well, and it's got to be hard too, because like especially when you're in kind of that scene, because I remember from personal experience, as far as the whole whoever shows up, it's a hard sell when people are like, so what do you guys do? Oh, well, we do like hardcore, like metalcore. And they're like, yeah. But it's like, like Christian music.
But see, the thing that sucked about our band, like for me as as a songwriter / like fan of the music, we were a band for so long. And until we got Chad, like Wilburn from, he was in Mind Rage and stuff. Until we got Chad in the band, every guy who played drums in the band up until that point was a rad dude, usually a friend, someone who really loved the music, but not a single one of them, without disparaging them as artists or, hardworking individuals, none of them could actually pull off what we were hearing in our heads.
Right, sure.
Like, none of them could do that. You know what I mean? I mean, like they were like punk / rock / whatever guy. And then when we got Chad on board, all of a sudden we had a guy who was better at his instrument than any of us were at ours. And that like was exciting because then all of a sudden we're just like, okay, all this stuff we've been trying to write and failing at recording for the last, couple albums and EPs, whatever. All of a sudden it's like, okay, now we can be a legitimate band. Like we can show up and open up for anyone. And like, we'll walk off the stage and they'll be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. Like that feeling of like, okay, I finally put all the pieces together. Now I can stand back and look at the picture.
Dude, I mean, it's like the first time you saw Zayo with Jesse for the first time,
Right, yeah.
As a guy in a band, and you saw them play, and you're just like, I just want to go home now.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and just quit forever and just become fans of bands.
Yeah.
Or start a podcast. That's what failed musicians do. We start podcasts. Those who don't criticize on the internet.
Right. Okay.
But no, that's super. And so like that first record, I think one of the things that,
well, when you say the first record, which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the first record that was nationally released.
Okay,
which would have been.
Are you talking about
Journey So Far?
Okay, so not Private Complex. So you're talking about the Solid State release?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I don't have the one before that.
So we had two before that.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, so we had the Pluto Records, which is the Private Conflicts and Suicides, which that was the one, which is cool because actually Chris, McCadden, he did all the art for that and everything. Yeah. It was so cool. It was a great little EP. We got to record that at Barry's, like as an independent band. It was really fun, and that was a really fun album. Good songs, but like we were saying, like instrumentally, not the best musicianship. Again, like we had a homeboy on drums, and I felt real bad too because like when he went home, like Barry, like he basically just sampled and like just basically replaced everything, like it. And this was like early Pro Tools, but he was really good, freaking amazing at it. And he did the best he could so that we didn't sound bad. But this is like way before quantization and all that jazz. But
yeah, he just had to do it. Yeah.
But then even before that, are you familiar with the band called My Space Coaster? Like an emo, like John LaMonica. He's a fantastic.
It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah. So we actually did a split EP with them.
Okay.
Even before that was when we were kind of still were like, that was. It's real cringy when I go back and listen to it, but I'm still stoked that I did it, But
sure.
That was kind of like literally our first thing that we did, and like I was playing. That was when I was still playing guitar, not playing bass.
Okay. So did that? So were both of those Pluto records?
No. So the first one, who put out the first one? Our friend Jacob. I can't remember the name of the record label. He kind of did, but yeah, our friend Jacob put that out. And then the second one was a Fury 151. Our friend Chris and Pluto kind of split the deal. They was like a joint EP thing, kind of, you know. And then we got signed to Solid State, and then that was the next, you know, the journey so far. That was when we had like a full length, and we were just like, yes, you know, we actually got to have like time in the studio, and we got to write an actual record, you know. Unfortunately, like, you know, our friend, my friend Phil, who's one of the raddest dudes in the world, he played drums and he did a great job. But we, like I said, we were really, I just think that, like, a lot of it, we just really expected too much of like just friends and stuff, and like we're like, you should be like as good as Dave Lombardo, and like he's this 19-year-old dude from, you know, like,
yeah, let me just wake up and be just as good as one of the best drummers out there. Yeah, like,
in your mind though, you're like, why can't you play this? And you're like, yeah. But yeah, like that was a fun record. And then, but at that time, that was when we met Chad, and like shortly after that, he came on board, and when we started touring with him, it was rad because all these songs that we had that were good songs, they weren't bad songs, they became really awesome live songs because we would play live. You know, we'd go on tour with like, you know, POD or Living Sacrifice or whoever, and like our album was out and people had heard the songs. They're like, yeah, it's a cool band. And then we play, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like we had 2 live guitarists, bass, and then we had Chad on drums, who's freaking phenomenal. And people were like, okay, like, what is this? You know, because this isn't what we heard on the album.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
And unfortunately, we never really got a chance to, like, that sound we were able to capture live kind of after Journey So Far. Like, we were never able to actually record an album with that lineup, you know?
Right. Well, was Journey
Sucks,
So
man.
Far all original material?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, not like original versus covers or something, but I mean, just right. Or was it like reused stuff?
No, it was all like 100. Like, literally, we were that band that were like always writing stuff. And Josh actually found a videotape the other day, not the other day, a little while back, of like, you know, hour-long show, and none of the songs on that show are on any of our albums.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what the and it was basically like a time kind of like in between our EP and then that full length. And a lot of them are really rad songs. I was like, dude, we never recorded any of these, because when we got signed to Solid State, we basically just kind of like said, okay, we have to step our game up even more, you know?
Right. How did that relationship come about with Solid State?
Oh, it was awesome. Like, I know kind of like Brandon and that like kind of scene from, you know, again, being in other bands. And it was weird, like, when I guess the whole connection that you know, wasn't really there, like you know, that my old bands, because this is like pre-internet and social media, so none of that was wrong. And until we did a Cornerstone like showcase thing, and they all kind of came out and saw. And I remember, like, you know, Tim from Focus and like all these guys that I'd sort of known from just, you know, touring in that Christian alternative rock scene.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're in this band. It's like, yeah. And then like we did the showcase and everybody came and saw it, you know, and thankfully like Roy Culver, who's a phenomenal freaking dude, you know, and like Brandon and these other guys were, you know, there because it's Cornerstone, and just happened to come by the tent because all these bands that we knew were saying, hey, you should check these guys out. And we played a great show, and like literally because of that show, and because we really just, you know, we did it just a really good, you know, showcase in this little tent at Cornerstone, they took a chance on us and, you know, put out an album. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really, that can't happen now. That doesn't happen anymore. And like back then, that was like, you know, that was a very small period of time where that stuff actually still happened, you know.
If that happened now, Brandon would walk up to you and be all like, great show. How many Facebook followers do you have?
Well,
you know what I mean? Like one of those, like, yeah.
Well,
like,
that was thankfully, like, you know, that was still the 90s when it was still like about, you know, someone in a record label that had the ability to put out physical music and stuff, heard a band or an artist or a singer and saw them perform live. And while they were watching them, sort of as a fan of music, they were like, I'm really enjoying this. And I really think kids, if they heard this, would buy this. And without trying to, you know, like make it just a you know, marketing thing, you know what I mean? Like the same thing with like, you know, with Oasis playing at King Tut's Wawa Hut, and it's like, I mean, he just happened to be there. Homeboy from Creation was there, and like, I want to sign you. And they're like, well, yeah, do you want to join? He's like, sure, but I want to sign you. And that's kind of like what it was with us. It was like, yeah, we'd already had EPs out and stuff, and he just saw us play live. And I think it kind of, with Roy and some of those guys that were at that festival that year happened to see us, and they were just like, okay, these guys, they can do live what you would hope they could do,
right?
Because they'd heard our EP through the scene and stuff. I think when they saw us live, they were like, okay, yeah, we could probably put this band in the studio and get, at what was going on at the time in the scene, like that we can get an album out of them that will slot into this vibe that's going on in the scene.
Sure, because I think at that time everybody was like real, especially Solid State kids were like real hard on like Zao and Embodiment and
Strong Arm.
Yeah,
well, not Embodiment. Yeah, you got to remember Embodiment came after us. Like Embodiment was around like before us as a death metal band here in Dallas.
Well, didn't
they got signed
Embrace
after
come
us.
out in 99 or 98?
Huh?
Didn't Embrace the Eternal come out in 98?
Wait, which one's that? Is that the one with Sean singing, or is that the one they're still death metal?
That's the one where they're still, well, it's not.
Well, I'm sorry. That's the one where Chris discovered Coalesce.
That's Chris. Yeah. So
decided
Chris,
to sound like Sean Ingram.
Yes. It sounds awesome.
We got signed like at the same time.
Okay.
But like, so Embodiment was like our local heroes here in like Texas.
Sure.
Like they were like the shit, and they were just death metal, just like insanely technical. And then like literally like about 97 to 98 ish, they like Chris had discovered Coalesce and discovered like Converge and some of these other.
Yeah.
And basically he was just like, okay, I'm done doing and like he just basically their music stayed the same. Like they stayed doing like this. Well, they were never really death metal. They were more like slam, I guess is what you would call it now, right?
Sort of, yeah. Because I've got that demo. It's not a demo, but it's a Solid State, or maybe it was Solid State. And somebody re-released it.
Cassette. Like I've got
like they've got like a song called "Dismembering Death" and like all this. Yeah,
they were like, have you heard Golgotha?
Yeah. And they were like super
Dude, that was
brutal.
Like the best song in the pit too. Whenever they did that, like because I had the breakdowns and everything. Anyway, yeah, I guess they'd kind of be considered more slam. Like now, like when you go back and consider
definitely, yeah.
Cats go away.
Yeah, there was just no word for it back then. Yeah,
but yeah, they're just death metal. But I don't know, whatever. But yeah, but they got signed around the same time. I can't remember if their album came out before or after. I don't know, dude. It's been so long. But yeah, those guys are like our best friends and like everything. And like I'm still a huge fan of everything they do. Like. I mean, Andy, Jason, like Kevin, all those guys, man. Like they were some of the raddest musicians. And you got to remember, these kids started when they're like 14 years old.
Right.
And some of their most technical, crazy stuff came when they were still in high school. Like when they got out of high school was kind of when they started to be a little bit more, air quotes, commercial.
We want to make music that people are going to actually buy. Yeah.
Yeah. And but I mean, dude, Andy, that dude, he's played guitar on records that you wouldn't realize too. Like, and because he did an album with Chase. You know who Chase Pagan is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did. He got to play guitar on Chase Pagan's album, and he goes out to LA to Indigo Ranch to to do this album. And like the bass player from Glassjaw is playing bass on it, and Steve Perkins from Jane's Addiction is the drummer.
Yeah,
and he's like in the studio, like. What? I'm ready, like hearing from. He's like, yeah. So you know who this? And I'm like, yeah, I know who that is. He's like, yeah, he's playing bass. I'm like, what?
Well, and I think he also played. He played in Tim Lambesis' band, the pre-jail Tim Lambesis.
Yeah, he did that death metal project.
Yeah, he was in that.
That was that was crazy.
Well, he's doing a new band. Have you heard Andy's new band?
Yeah. Oh, that's not his new band. He's been doing this for ages.
Well, I know, but it's now it's actually starting to get like promotion and
stuff. People are trying to push it. Yeah, like, but dude, that shit. It's come on. I mean, the dude he's one of those guys that like. Okay, I can't remember that. There's actually a name for it. I've heard of it like where people talk about how they see music in shapes and colors instead of hearing it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Andy's one of those guys. Like I remember when we were young, like he was explaining like how that worked. Like, and I remember years later listening to like a NPR pod thing, and I was like, oh, that's what he talks about because he doesn't hear sounds, he sees them in shapes and colors. Dude, this guy is like next level.
Yeah.
He's just a weird cat, man.
He hasn't
He hasn't
made anything that I didn't like. Even the more commercial stuff. I know
Sure.
I know I've got like the whole like Discuss Metal Dan and Discuss Metal podcast and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I like Narrow Scope of Things is my favorite embodiment record.
So I mean, I remember when they put that out there. There's so many people that didn't like it, and I was just like, man, fuck you. Like, give it. Like, why are you mad at them? They let you down? Well, guess what, pussy? Like, I'm sorry that your feelings are so like fucking like soft. You like hardcore metal guy with tattoos.
Go start your own death metal band and make it the most brutal thing on the planet. Yeah,
but it's like, are your feelings hurt? Like, what?
Well, yeah, man, they did that to me personally. You know, that's our favorite thing on discography discussion. Is I'm all like, I know they were thinking exactly what the hell is Dan going to say about this.
Is he really? You know what? Listen, track 7, about 3 minutes and 50 seconds in, when you do that one turnaround, is he going to understand why we?
No. He's going to be like, it sounds disjointed and it sounds like everybody had a bunch of ideas. And in order not to hurt somebody's feelings, they went ahead and just went with every idea that came.
I still remember too, because so they put out that Scope of Things with Sean, right? And then they, I can't remember all the but they signed like a demo deal with the guy who produced like Three Doors Down, their big album, and like a couple of things. And I remember they were at Dallas Sound Lab for a couple weeks, man. They were like literally like they were at we shared a rehearsal space with them, and they were like at this rehearsal space for like a month, just writing material with Homeboy. And then they were at Dallas Sound Lab, which is the place like Pantera and like Steve Ray Vaughan, all these people recorded there. They were there for another few weeks, recording dozens and dozens of songs with this guy, and then radio silence for like ages. And it was just, man, it was so weird because I remember, like, if I remember correctly, like it was like a time-based thing, like, I want to say was it Universal, whatever it was. Somebody out there will correct me. But they had like this demo deal, and like it was a certain like, and then as it's like the farther along, like we just kept thinking, all right, well, they're going to put out this amazing album, and then nothing happened. And we're just like, how can these people at a record label like hear this, this level of musicianship and songwriting? I can understand, like, maybe they didn't care for the vocalist or maybe this or that. Great. But still, like, figure something out, because how can you have guys that are that talented in a room and not put out something, And that was definitely one of the things with me with like the music business sort of thing early on that kind of really made me understand that like these guys, they don't know shit.
They don't care. They just care about what they think is going to sell.
No, they don't even care about that, bro. They have zero clue. I remember when like I was in a band this was a few years later, and we were working with Jeff Hansen Management. That's like SR-71 and Creed and like all these bands. And we were working with them. This is before Creed went on break, so they still had like money and incentive and stuff. And they would tell us when we sat down with like these record executives, and they would ask like what we sounded like. They would say just literally just whoever the top 2 or 3 artists are on the radio that day, just tell them you sound like a really awesome mix of that. And it could be like fucking Beyonce, Linkin Park, and like fucking Slayer.
And Tool.
Just say it,
throw Tool in there so the Brainiacs will get on board with it.
Yeah, but like you'll say these 2 or 3 names that this asshat knows and conflates with like record sales, and they don't care about what it actually sounds like. They don't know.
Right.
And I just remember being like in this meeting with these guys, just like, oh, wow. Okay. It was real like, but at the same time, then you start to go through these meetings and stuff, and you meet these people, and you're like, they don't know. They have zero clue. They're just a commodity to them. And once you kind of understand that, it allows kind of you to separate that business part with the artist part, so that you can keep the art still pure, and then the business side, the business shit.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. That's a story I hear more often than not, is they say that some of these industry dudes, they'd rather do nothing than something. Like bare minimum amount of work.
There's a lot of fear too, man. There's a lot of fear in some back. Again, this is the 80s and 90s.
It's back whenever there was an actual music industry.
About like 2010, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of fear too, of like the fear of missing out. That phone, like you just terrified of like not finding the next big thing. So you just sign everyone,
Yeah.
because you can always write them off and just drop them. like there's a band out of Dallas called Sugar Bomb that was again supposed to be the next big thing. They had a song on a movie soundtrack and all that stuff. And here in the Dallas area, we thought they were going to be huge. And then a year goes by, then 2 years goes by, and then 3 years goes by, and then finally the label just had shelved their debut album. Instead of putting it out, they just kept pushing it off and pushing it off. And these guys just gave up because they were just so beaten down. And we were like, you guys are amazing. Like, look them up sometime. I'll send you some of them. Like, they're really like Beatles-esque harmonies, power pop, alt rock stuff. Great band, whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to me the amount of bands too that we've talked to that have been like, and then they just held on to our record, never released it, or
Bro, that happens so much.
Yeah, like so many records. I've got promo copies of records.
Yeah, dude.
Back when I used to do CD reviews for magazine, so it was like I would get all these promo copies of records, and then they would never release.
You remember the Revolution Smile? Did you ever get the independent version of that album? Like the one that Sean released like before they got signed?
No.
So he actually did that whole album on his own.
Okay.
Like after he I guess so he had his audition with Foo Fighters, and like that kind of was like his like whole thing, like,
yeah,
I'm gonna do a rock band. And like he did this whole album, and then they got signed to DreamWorks, I believe it was. But instead of just releasing that demo, they re-recorded all the same song.
Yeah.
And I remember like just being like, it was a great album, but I was like, oh, that demo album was so good though.
Yeah, there's a nuance to an original recording sometimes that you can't get when you redo
they got to put their, they got to drop their finger on it, and their fingerprint has to be all over that bitch,
Sure, yeah, and that's how you can collect on a copyright these years later. So like, if I started blasting a song from a band right now on this stream, that then they could come in and be all like, yeah, we never even released this, but it's our copyrighted material. So
well, plus too, it's like, how is the label going to start putting you in debt if you don't record an album and owe them for it?
Right. Yeah.
You may have a great album, but they didn't pay for it. So why are they going to put it out? They want to pay for an album that you owe them for.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. So with kind of shift back a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. To Society's Finest. So you guys put the record out, The Journey So Far, and then it kind of almost seemed like radio silence. Like, did the band just kind of disappear after that, or?
Yeah, so that was a lot. Okay, listen, like, so the thing is I'm not gonna blame Solid State / Tooth and Nail for any of our like not becoming the biggest fucking band in the world.
Right, sure.
It's not their fault. Some of it though is like, I think a lot of kids, especially in the 90s, early 2000s, like, you think you get signed to a band like, or to a label like that, and all of a sudden, well, we're gonna be able to just record this awesome album, we're gonna be out on tour. Like, because you don't understand, like, you still, like, you may have toured in the van or this and that, but you still don't understand how labels really are working. And you're just like, well, they're just going to put us out on tour. No, they're fucking not. Like, that's not how that shit works. You know what I mean?
They're like, call your friends, call some friends from other bands, get something going.
Yeah. So a lot of us though in the band, we were all early 20s, but a lot of us already had families and stuff. So like, we couldn't just go on the road and do whatever. And so we kind of like had like some weird like starts and stops of like, getting rid of Homeboy and then bringing on another friend and this and that. And we would do some touring, but it was all like sporadical, like we go out to the West Coast to come back, go out to the East Coast to come back. But it was real start and stop,
Yeah.
And we just couldn't get a group of guys who could go on the road at the same time. We didn't have a record label that had all this money that could like promote the shit out of us so that wherever we went, we could have radio play or a video. We didn't have any, we never got one video,
Yeah.
When, a very few Solid State, era, like that 1.0, 1.5 era Solid State, the first like 20 bands, I guess, or so, had actual, like, I think Living Sacrifice had like that one video.
They had Reject, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if any
Training for Utopia had a video, but it looked more to me like
they paid for it.
I mean, honestly, if you watch the video, it looks like they just recorded it with a hand cam.
Yeah,
but it was a video,
Yeah, but I mean, like we expected we're gonna be in every record store, indie store at least or whatever, and we're gonna have a video on Headbangers Ball. And none of that happened because of course not. Why would we be the first band they do that for? You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, even Zayo, who I felt like was kind of a cash cow for them, kind of, but they didn't get a video until after they were off Solid State.
No.
You know?
Well, yeah.
But I mean, for them, it was the same thing. People in and out, you know, not being able to do tours.
Well, it's hard because, like, if you can't tell Homeboy that he's going to at least be able to like eat this month, like,
right?
Why? No, why am I going to stick around with you douchebags? You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it sucks, but that's just, man. And like the Christian metal / hardcore punk, whatever scene in that time was so different than it became even 10, 15, you know, like once you start to get to the 2000s and 2010s, and there's actually like an ecosystem and an economy sort of established for bands that come out of that scene, you know, not necessarily whatever. I think when I say Christian rock or metal, most people now, especially from that, they get what I'm talking about, you know?
Yeah,
like,
totally. It's not like,
it doesn't mean you're like some preachy this and that. You know what I mean?
No, because like most of the bands that we're talking
family.
about, most of the bands that we're talking about, like you listen to them, you're not going to get like a religious vibe or anything like that.
Well, it's just some of the stuff that they're singing about and writing about comes from kids that might have grown up in church or in this, but they're at a point in their lives where that's the palette they're writing from. You know, that's their worldview that they sort of came up. But they're dealing with the same shit everyone else is, you know, at 21, 22, you know, like, oh, I can drink now or this or that, you know, and anyway, like, anyway. So like, but yeah, so we really fell off the map because we just couldn't keep guys in the band. We couldn't tour. We couldn't do anything because there was no such thing as tour support back then.
Right.
Like, the label wasn't going to get us a bus and buy us on an opening slot with, I don't know, like who was big in 2000, 2001.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
like,
you were stuck with touring with bands that were like you on the same level, on the same.
Yeah. We were stoked if we could open for some other shit metal band, you know?
Sure. Yeah. You're like, give me in with like, Because I mean, I want to say like at that time it would have been like what, like the new metal bands, like the, you know.
Well, it's kind of like it was like the so you got to remember like the whole like Earth Crisis and Victory Records thing was really blowing up around then. The Trustkill thing was just starting.
True.
You know, so we had all these like metalcore and like hardcore metal, punk, blah blah blah, whatever. You know, that umbrella was really stretching out from like, you know, you had the stuff down in Florida, you know, the East Coast thing, West Coast thing, Botch and stuff like up in, you know, the Pacific Northwest. All that stuff was going on around the time we were trying to put out our first full length, you know, but at the same time, like, what if those bands wanted to play with some like Christian metal band, you know?
Right. Yeah. Because there was still like some kind of weird stigma with that at the time.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, because I remember joking with my friends, you know, mid 2010, 2011, I was like, 78% of the bands of this genre are Christian metal bands, you know, like
they came out of that scene, you know, whatever.
Yeah. You know, whether they're Bible thumpers or not, it's just, you know, they came up out of that kind of same pool. Well,
and I think what what happened in the 2000s to the 2010s, what a lot of kids that came out of that scene, the hardcore / metal, what a lot of them realize is like, well, yeah, I grew up in a youth group too. And like, then you have these other kids that are like the straight edge kids or this and that. And they're like, well, they don't drink and smoke either. Okay, well, so we can get along with those guys, or we can go see that band and know that they're not some booze hounds. You know what I mean? So like,
sure.
I think what happened over the next 10, 15 years is the homogenation of that scene to where a lot of the guys that weren't religious, you know, in their maybe like in their like outward persona didn't have a problem with like bands that came out of that scene, because so very few of those bands remained preachy or evangelical. Let me say that word.
Yeah,
you know, very few of them were like altar calls from stage and this and that, you know, because we were never one of those bands. Like I honestly, like, there was maybe 2 or 3 times in our entire career as a band where we actually sort of had some sort of like real heavy message from stage.
Right.
And those couple of times probably came because we were at like a specific venue or a specific event, and there was some people that we might have seen that like we're just like our heart was maybe heavy for this or that and whatever they might have been going through, and we just like took a moment to say something hoping to encourage them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we were never just like, you're going to hell tomorrow. We weren't that band, you know, like
if you were to die tonight, where would you? Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Like that doesn't work, man. Like you and I both, you know, that never, like you got so much further with people just being real and being honest and and I think that was one of the reasons too, we were able to kind of like, exist sort of like, and be respected among bands that weren't like, you know, the Christian scene, because we weren't like, you know, like at the end of the show, like we weren't the band that was like trying to corner the other bands and like, you know, get them saved or this and that. We were just trying to just like be rad dudes. And like every once in a while, somebody would be like, dude, why you guys don't do this or that? And like, we'd be like, no, it's all good. You know, and like they'd talk to, if they wanted to talk to us, hey, great, we'll talk to you about this. But we were never like the whole, you know, you know what I mean?
Well, absolutely don't name any names, but did you see that? Were there bands out there that were cornering bands trying to do that stuff?
Yeah. For real, dude. Like, yeah. But like there was bands back then that like were like intimidating about their faith and stuff. You know? And the thing back looking on it, it was never like a lot of those guys is that they were never trying to be, it was never a negative thing, or it was never like a judgmental type thing. Honestly, I'll tell you right now, the only guys that were ever like really judgmental were the guys that were like the straight edge, like Christian guys.
Sure. Yeah.
Those are the worst. And like, I was part of that scene too. I was a dickhead, dude, at a certain point in my life. Cause like, I don't smoke, I don't do this and that. And then like, but you know, once you kind of examine the whole thing, you're like, you know, it's like, it's, you know, just another religion and, you know, but like, I respect people that, you know, choose. I have some wonderful friends even to this day that have chosen to, you know, follow that lifestyle. And I 100% respect those choices and stuff like that. But like at a certain point in my life, I was just like doing certain things because it made me feel good about myself. Not for the actual, like reasons I said I was doing it. I just did it because it made me feel better than this guy or that guy, you know? Well, at least I'm not like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a difference between having a dominating mindset and just maybe wanting to share with somebody what worked for you. If somebody seems like they're having a hard time or they're, you know, something along those lines. I
have 3 cats, dude. It's the worst. Like, and I don't need these cats, man. Like I literally, anyway, I'll tell you anyway.
Yeah.
They're just, they're children of the apocalypse. They're demons. I have this picture I sent my daughter one time. All 3 of these cats, they were in my bathtub, like facing each other. And like for a moment, I was like, they're plotting to kill me. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to my daughter, and she said the same thing. She's like, I think they're like trying to summon like a demon or something, Dad.
That's funny.
I was like, probably I should get rid of these guys.
More than likely. Something I did want to touch on was actually Tim from Absolutely Dying being in Society's Finest.
Yeah. So we had kind of, so 2 people. So here's the thing. So 2 people that were definitely in our band at different points, but both individuals tend to, like, when I look online, people tend to have these, they're almost like mythically larger characters in the history of Society's Finest than they actually were in real life.
Okay.
Not to downplay them at all. Like both of them were very important people in my life and in the life of this band, but neither one of them were on any recording or like wrote any songs that ended up, you know, anywhere. So it's just kind of funny because anyway, so the first would be Chris McCadden, like, who is first of all, he's probably one of the most intelligent, creative people I've ever met on this earth. Like the dude just thinks differently. Like he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever known. And I remember meeting him when he was kind of first like new to Embodiment, like he was their new singer. And like, I remember like meeting him and just like just talking about random stuff and about music or movies and things. And he just saw things differently than other people. Anyway, a rad dude. And he was the singer though. And I didn't know he played guitar. And then it was just real kind of weird how things, you know, happen and things come together. And there was a point where we were going to be going on tour and we needed we were gonna we really did need like a second guitar,
Right.
And I didn't realize he was about to quit Embodiment and stuff, and like anyway, so he basically just ended up playing guitar in our band. So not only and he shows up and he's phenomenal, like he can play the shit out of the guitar, and I was like, what? And not to disparage our vocalist, but we had this dude who was a legend in our kind of regional metal scene as a metal vocalist, you know, like not only death metal, but then he transitioned to being like sort of like a, you know, metalcore, hardcore kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And we're just like, and he's in our band. It was so awesome. Of course, it didn't, you know, he ended up actually, one of the tours we did out to LA, to the West Coast, he actually got like an interview at, what was the name of the studio? Oh my God. It was an dude, what were they called? They did basically like they did album artwork and stuff like that. They did like a couple that like Marilyn Manson albums and like what was the oh man, it'll kind of know what we're talking. Anyway, but so he ended up kind of just he like literally after that tour, he was like, yeah, so I got that job and I'm gonna move to LA. And we're just like, okay. I mean, like, what are you gonna say? Because like he landed his dream job in LA. So you're like, oh, you know. So anyway, like later on, it was just real weird because like I remember talking to Tim on the internet, like very early internet, you know, just emailing and stuff.
Sure.
And he had sent me a CD of A Life Once Lost, not Life Once Lost, the hardcore band, you know, but
okay.
He had a demo called A Life Once Lost. And he was like, yeah, this is basically like just me. And it's like, so he was playing guitar and screaming and everything else. I was like, dude, this is really good stuff. I'm digging. Yeah. And he was like, I'm not sure exactly how it all worked out, but like we conned him into moving out to Texas and like just joining our band. I remember picking up from the airport and this dude was like, you know, tall. He was as tall as I am and like just like full sleeve tattoos and stuff. I was like, he looked like a hardcore like rock star.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, finally, like someone
dressed for the job you want. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, you know, we started playing shows with him. And he was, you know, a competent guitar player. He was fine. He was good. But his whole thing was his drive and like vision and everything. And we started doing shows with him. And it was kind of funny because like looking back, I can totally see that he viewed like what he was doing in our band as like an internship or like as like a learning experience in that in metal music, you know, basically like he was just doing local stuff in San Diego. So he found a band that needed someone that he was the perfect fit for. And then, you know, he started going on tour with and playing with, and it enabled him to learn more of that and meet more people, which is brilliant for what, you know, he wanted to do with his career.
Right.
I totally got it later. But then like, you know, like when I was, you know, early 20s, like I remember like, you know, we're doing these shows and then he's like, goes back to, you know, Southern California. And I'm like, what about our band? Not realizing in his mind, his whole plan all along was to like, I've got this concept for a band that's going to be like 4 steps ahead of where everyone else is right now. And eventually like it came, you know, because a lot of people don't realize As I Lay Dying, remember he toured a lot and for a long time in vans, like back and forth for probably like 3 or 4 years.
A while. Yeah.
Yeah. Before anything really, because I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years before anything really finally happened. And then when, you know, Metal Blade finally caught on and like, you know, got behind him, that was when boom, you know, but he'd put in all that work and all that, you know, effort and everything. But yeah, it was weird because he lived in like my wife and I at the time, we had a house and it was so funny, dude, because like literally every band that you can possibly think of stayed with us because we had this house that was this like kind of front area. And then there was this back like add-on. It was kind of weird. Like we never went back there. It was big. Like it was big enough to be an apartment or a house. Like it was big, but like it was just me and her at the time. No kids, no nothing. And every band that you could possibly think of, you know, like Self-Minded, like Esocaris, like Extol, like any of those bands from that time period, and Brothers Keeper, like any, like not just Christian bands, like any band, they would always stay with me because like they knew I had a clean house, a big old backyard, and I would always have like vegetarian food and stuff and everything. and every band would stay with him. So anyway, Tim was like one of those people that he lived with us for like a year while he was in the band, and he was back there in that room all the time. And I like looking back, it's funny because I can totally see that he was just working on a goal. You know what I mean? So like he basically put his time in our level of band, and then when it got to a point where he was like, he saw the vision for the next step, he just went for it. And like at first I was like all butthurt when I was like young, and then like as I look back, I was like, smart dude, you know?
Yeah, he definitely had a plan from day one. And
none of us fucking had a plan.
Right. Yeah, I think don't get me wrong, those first couple of As I Lay Dying releases were rough.
Just generic, you know.
Yeah.
Like, no.
But he found a way.
But they're just as good as anything else.
Sure. Yeah.
Like looking back at like early 18 Vision stuff and like, you know, whatever, anything from that time period. That's just like, you know, part of you's like cringy, but part of you is like, oh, good memories. But then part of you's like, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as more rock kind of, you know, more rock and roll kind of seeped into that scene, it got better and better. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. So there's another thing I wanted to bring up, and also worth mentioning that Tim was in another band I like called Point of Recognition for a minute.
Yeah. Well, see, I think that's not when we first met them, because we did a show in San Diego at some church. I can't remember what it was, and like it was so weird because there's a picture of us at this church, and there's like some of the guys from No Innocent Victim in the crowd or on the stage or whatever, and then like all the guys from Noise Ratchet are like in the crowd. And then like half the guys that kind of became As I Lay Dying were there. It was so weird. Like I'll try to find the picture. It's on my Facebook or my whatever, but it's so strange when I see that, because I look back and I'm like, first of all, we're all fucking babies, you know,
sure,
like
yeah,
22 years old and stuff. And then other times, like, think about how many guys in that crowd went on to be in, you know, established bands that did something.
Yeah. Tell me about Evanescence.
Oh, okay. So that's another thing so that's another Mind Rage connection that people might not know. Like,
John LeCompte, right?
Yeah. And Living Sacrifice though too.
Yeah.
Because Rocky was also, so here's the thing. Well, the touring guy. He was the touring drummer. So it was so weird. Okay. So, when I got married in 99, I was in San Antonio, and it was so weird because we were on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, which is this like, you know, like vacation area. And I remember my wife at the time, my brand new wife, we come across John LeCompte and his fiance, who I guess had just gotten married literally that same week as well. And like, so we're all in San Antonio at the time, and like, it was just real weird and talking to them, and like it was just a strange, like, you know what I mean, like when you meet someone and you're not, you know, you're on vacation, you're like, how am I seeing you here?
Right.
Yeah. So fast forward just a little bit longer, I was kind of out of like the metal scene. I was doing like rock music and stuff, you know, and I get a phone call from like John LeCompte, and he's like, hey man, what's going on? You know, this, and I was like, oh man, just working on my band, blah, 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 you know, because, you know, that's what you always say. Here's my project that I'm excited about.
Right.
And so he's like, well, here's the deal, man. Like, so I'm in this band. It's some people from Little Rock, and we got signed to Roadrunner. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, that's a big deal. Roadrunners.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me more. And he was like, yeah, so, I'm playing guitar, and you know Rocky, right? I was like, yeah, I know Rocky. Well, so he's playing drums. I know Rocky played drums. I was like, wait, the guitar? Anyway, and he was like, yeah, he's playing drums, and you know, blah blah blah. And he told me that you know, is a girl singer. I was like, you know, okay. And he's like, so, and here's where he lost me. Like at the time on the phone, he was like, so just imagine it's like Sarah McLachlan meets Nine Inch Nails, and like,
okay,
yeah. So in my mind, like literally at that moment, I was just like, you know, and I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That sounds like absolute dog shit on top of like cat shit on fire. Sarah McLachlan meets Nine Inch Nails. Like, yeah, I love Sarah McLachlan just like anyone else. And of course I love Nine Inch Nails, but those two things, the twain shall never meet. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, well, we're going out to LA to record this album and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm sure we're going to need a bass player. And it says like, well, if I think of anyone, I'll give you a call, because your band sounds like fucking dog shit, stupid. And you're probably a fucking idiot, you hillbilly. I love you, John.
Go
but
back
I'm
to
just, you know,
Arkansas.
like,
Yeah.
I was an idiot. Yeah, I was an idiot. You know, like you know, he was doing his best to explain something to me, and he wasn't saying like, you know, whatever. But it was just talking two guys, you know, talking about their music and stuff.
Right.
And in my mind, I was like, this is fucking stupid. And about 8 months later or so, the Spider-Man song, you know, with the "Wake Me," oh god, dude,
Yeah.
I remember seeing the video and be like, I just want to sit at my computers like this. Oh, I was like, my stomach hurt. Like I wanted, like you know what I mean? It's just like one of those things. Like you're just like, oh, come on.
Let the
like,
butt hurt flow through you.
I mean, in reality, of course, like, you know, nothing ever works out the way it should, and this and that, and things aren't what they always seem. Of course, you know. And looking back now, we know, you know, like. Of course, it wasn't the perfect situation you thought it might be.
In a certain scenario, you may have dodged a bullet on that.
Of course. Like, and like, yeah, no, absolutely. Especially like how many of those guys, like, you know, weren't stoked at the end of their time in that particular situation. Oh, 100%. But in the moment, you're just like, what?
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you see like, you know, when you see the girl you knew in high school and you're just like, she was a nerd. And then all of a sudden at 19, you turn around and she's like, you know, 36, 26, 36, like, you know, like, and you're just like, wait, what the fuck? You know, you know what I mean? It's like, no, but you don't realize that, you know, whatever, you know what I mean? You know, the whole deal.
Yep.
Like in the moment, I was just like sick to my stomach, like thinking that, oh, I didn't turn down shit. I didn't get offered to be in this and that, but I just remember like the conversation thinking like, oh, this guy's a moron. And then like, just realizing that like, okay, his way of explaining what he was, the project that he was involved in, just he was trying his best to explain it to me. And looking back, okay, I can see why he would say Sarah McLachlan meets Nine Inch Nails, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but I could also understand with no context how that would sound, you know, on paper.
Yeah. No, it's just one of those things where you're like, when someone says that to you, you know, you're just like, there'll be someone's like, yeah, it's like Beastie Boys meets Justin Bieber, and you'd be like, well, listen, whatever drugs you're on, look, I love you, but you need to stop doing them right now. You
know? Right. Oh man. So were you part of the kind of second incarnation of Society's Finest?
Okay, so the point where Josh and I kind of like stopped making music together, and I just kind of had to walk away. I'm trying to think of the exact year. I was already married, so it was probably already 2001-ish, 2002. I'm trying to remember exactly when. You know what? It was okay. So it was before my mother passed. So it was. Oh, man. I'm trying to. Anyway, so there was some personal things that were kind of going on. At the time, the lineup of the band was Chad on drums, still just phenomenal fucking drummer. Like, I can't imagine, like, he's one of those guys, like, when you meet in life, like, if you get him involved especially if you're in a metal band, like, if you get involved in a band, like, whatever is going on, you'll find a way to make it work. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And he wasn't the problem. This guy Chad was never the problem. And then on guitar, so Eli was on guitar for a good while. Eli, he was from San Diego, part of like, he might have been in Noise Ratchet at one point even, I don't know. But he ended up being in one of my other bands, like down the line, because we stayed good friends. And he actually left before I did. He was he came on board about the same time Tim was on board. So Tim and Eli they're both from San Diego. And then Tim went home, Eli stayed, and then Eli eventually left. And there was just some stuff kind of going on in the band because like I said, I came out like that straight edge, like, you know, scene, you know, from all that, and like some of the other guys in the band. Number one, we're never part of that. They were never subscribed to that way of life anyway. So it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay for me to push my beliefs on them anyway.
Right.
But maybe some of the other guys in the band who at one point, like, were kind of part of that scene and then all of a sudden no longer were, it created like a schism, you know, because, oh, well, you know, Johnny and I were straight edge together. And then now Davey's part of the crew. And he was never straight edge, but, you know, now Johnny's not straight edge. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. Yep.
That whole...
Little semantics, yep.
But you got to remember, like, being a 21, 22-year-old isn't much different from being a fucking 12-year-old. You know, I mean, there's not a whole lot of maturation that goes on, when it comes to clicks and bullshit like that. And I just kind of was at a point to where I had gone through some heavy stuff in my life and things. And I just was just like, I thought this band was kind of one thing. And then like all of a sudden now I'm the only guy that is, that kind of goes along with whatever vibe, and all you guys are drinking and smoking and partying. And, in reality, looking back on it, I was just butthurt. And like, I felt like I didn't belong. And instead of looking back, instead of figuring out, okay, what do we have in common? What do we still have that we can do? What do we have that like clicks still? Instead of being that way, I was just kind of a dick and was just like, well, you're not straight edge anymore, and you drink and you smell and blah, 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 and you swear too much, whatever. And instead of realizing, okay, first of all, do we all still like the same kind of music and make good music? Are we all still fairly good people at heart? Okay, I was just worried about shit that didn't matter. You know what I mean?
Sure. Those intangible things. Yep.
Like a lot of us get that way. A lot of us, when we're young, a lot of us getting, you know what I mean, dude. And
I used to be a youth group kid. I totally understand. Yeah.
And I'm so thankful though that I was able, not super long after that, to be able to kind of like see how I was being like not cool and like repair bridges with people that were friends of mine, and be able to sort of, especially with Josh, like, be able to be there for him over the last 20 years and like be friends through health shit and relationship stuff and everything. And like, even as like literally as most recently as like this last month, like, talking about music and saying like, let's, do this or that. Maybe we could, and I'm there for him with whatever he might need as far as, doing something music wise. I'll 100% support him, because he's been there for me and, I've been there for him in fucked up situations, and, the guy's been, we both literally, it's crazy because we both literally been by each other's side in the hospital. Like when the other, and like, it's when that stuff happens, all the other like silly things that were important when you're 19, 20, none of that stuff matters anymore,
Yep, 100%. Those types of connections, most people fall off after a few years. A lot of our friendships and our lives are just a revolving cast of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's those people that stick around that ultimately become the most important.
Indeed,
that's where I'm at. With what we do, and I wouldn't do this if I wasn't doing it with my friends. Minus tonight, where it is just me doing it without my friends. But
because they don't like you. They don't like you. They think you're an asshole.
I mean,
you were talking shit about him earlier.
That's true. I was. Yeah. Before we went live, man, I was knocking off
you're
the
like
mad
that
shit.
Joe guy is a dick.
Yeah, 100%. He would agree with that. But we're all dicks, man. So what's the craziest story from that era that you've got?
Dude, Sean Ingram's penis.
Explain.
Sean, the original vocalist from Zayo, probably is the most hung guy you'll ever see in your life. Yeah.
That's not Sean Ingram.
Yeah, dude. Not Sean. I'm wrong. Sean Ingram's from Coalesce. I'm sorry.
I was like, no, Sean Ingram is not in Zayo.
Hold on.
Jonas?
Yeah, Sean Jonas. Thank you. I'm looking it up.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, dude. Like I remember like being in Little Rock one time, and his whole thing that he would do is he would come out of the bathroom and air dry. Jesse did that too, which is a lot grosser because Jesse was never as like attractive as Sean.
Dude's from Virginia, man. Yeah.
But like Sean would just walk out butt naked, and you'd be like, what is that?
Okay.
No, but
wow.
other crazy stories though. The drinking gasoline thing was crazy. That was weird. Some of the coolest, like strangest stories was when I was okay. Yeah, do you remember the band? Well, I don't know. You remember the band Nailed Promise?
I do. Yes.
On Red. So I toured with them as a bass player because the bass player he couldn't go on the road. I was already friends with the guys, and like I did a bunch of tours with those guys. Like so they're on Rescue Records along with NIV and POD.
Right.
And so we would do a bunch of these tours like together. And we did this one thing where it was like, we weren't on tour with Living Sacrifice, but like somehow it worked out to where like for like a month or two in a row, almost every other show we did was POD, NIV, and Nailed Promise, and Living Sacrifice.
Okay.
Somehow it was just this weird thing. And what was hilarious though is we'd play these shows sometimes literally in the middle of, I mean, just nowhere. Like, listen, not to disparage where you live, but you know, you're in the Midwest, kind of, and sometimes there'll be this random concert, especially back then, and in your heart, you know that like there's going to be no one there.
Yeah, it's at First Baptist Church of whatever.
Yeah, exactly, or some skate park or something or whatever. And it was so funny because we would do these shows with these 4 bands, who of which a lot of them, the individuals, would go on to do really big things.
Right.
You know, run a huge hardcore record label, or be a massive pop rock band, or run a merchandising company out of Nashville that, you know, does shit for Van Halen and stuff, you know. But like, it's just funny because we would do these shows, and like, of the 20 people in attendance, all 20 of which were in the four bands. And it's just so, man, it was such a rad time, because like, you realize, I remember too thinking of like realizing the ridiculousness of it in the moment. Because I remember being like, especially with POD and stuff like I remember knowing, at the very least, thinking that Sonny is going to be a star somehow, let alone the whole band. And the whole band managed to just fucking blow up. And, you know, with Living Sacrifice, you know, and Bruce, you know, literally willed that band to be a rock metal juggernaut, and, you know, all that stuff. And anyway, but like, it was just being in awe of some of those guys at the time, you know, just was so rad. And I think one of the really cool things too was, and I tell people, and I was actually telling a friend of mine this story, and they're probably listening right now. I was telling them this story yesterday. The coolest story I have, period, of touring / being on the road / whatever. The absolute best moment of my music life was in 1994, in August / September. Because at that moment, I was on tour with a band in England.
Okay.
While Oasis and Blur were battling it out for the #1 spot on the British record chart with Roll With It and Country House, if you remember, because Blur pushed the album back 2 weeks, on this and that. And I remember being in England while that shit was going on. And I was already a fan of, you know, Blur and Oasis both, you know, because like, and I remember like being in there, and like how insane people were about making like, dude, everywhere you went, you saw a poster for that shit, or like you heard something. And like, I've never seen anything that insane, whether it be like sports rivalries or a movie coming out or a TV, nothing. Except for being in England in like, you know, August, September of 1994, and like the Oasis, like, no, dude, nothing will explain to people, especially here in the States, how like rabid their fan bases were about making sure that their band was #1. Like, I can't think of anything in America that's been like that.
Not since then, no.
Well, because we're a bunch of pussies and we don't care, you know?
Sure, yeah, 100%. We just kind of do what we do, especially now.
But yeah, but music fans over there, like, it's a fucking, like, it was life or death. It still is, you know, like how they do with the Christmas #1s over there and stuff, you know, but like Rage Against the Machine a couple years ago, you know what I'm talking about. Like, but over there, man, like, dude, and I remember like, but that's the thing though, too, man, like, not to be Mr. Old fucking nostalgia guy, like, but in 1994, 95, like with, you know, Oasis and Blur and all that stuff, like, of course, in America with Nirvana and all that, you know, everything that was going on. Dude, listen, I'm like, I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and she even admits that, like, you know, like, you've got like, when I was a teenager, you know, of course, you know, all that stuff. And then when my dad was a teenager with like Led Zeppelin and Queen, this and that. And like, she looks at the shit that her and her teenage friends have. And she you know, laments the fact that they don't have this something that they can, this zeitgeist, you know?
They don't have the pressure, I think music back then was released under a large amount of pressure and expectation. There's no pressure or expectation to me.
But also at the same time, is like, you literally were inventing the future. Like with like, you know, think about it with like punk rock or thrash or, you know, grunge, fill in the blank. Every 5-10 years, you could be a part of something new. that like was changed, that would literally change the world. And now like you have got like, so like, well, okay, so good example. I look at like Lil Peep, you know, a few years ago.
Yeah.
That dude, if he was like even 15, 20 years ago, literally would have been, if, you know, not necessarily a superstar, you know, fucking pop star, but would have changed the world.
Yeah, totally.
But because no one gives a shit about anything now, it's like, oh, great. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
what I
Does that
mean,
make
you don't see that kind of thing because nobody buys anything anymore.
But nobody cares. It feels
Right.
like that's the thing. It feels like, so like, okay, like a band I don't like at all. 100 Gex. Are you familiar with them?
No.
They're like what's called hyper pop.
Okay.
And like I'm not sure, one of the guys or one of the people in the band is like trans and like this and then like I remember like I'm not a big fan of them, but I remember like kind of sort of doing a deep dive into their stuff and really walking out of it with like a huge respect for them as artists, because they're legitimately doing something that's dangerous, you know, like that's different, like music. If you ever listen to them, you may not like them, but you'll probably walk away with the same you know, like thinking at the very least, like they're definitely doing something fucking different. Like they're not trying to be Justin Bieber or Billie Eilish, whatever.
Yeah.
They're doing something absolutely crazy and weird, which is there's something to be said for. But now no one cares. Like, okay, think about it, though, if that happened in like 1980 or 1990 or even 2000, that would have, you know, when someone's doing something literally dangerous and crazy
Yeah.
with the music, people are like, oh my God, this, and now it's like, oh, okay, so you cut yourself in half on stage and ate a fucking colony of bees.
Right.
Who cares? I don't know. It sounds stupid. I'm just saying. Like, but seriously though, like how that's kind of where we're at, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Is music dangerous nowadays?
I mean, it can be. I don't think it can be without live shows.
Like seriously, if Sophie is not dangerous, or if like fucking I don't know, like 100 Gex or fucking I don't know, if like what is dangerous?
Well, the band that I care the most about right now, I don't know if it fits the definition of dangerous, is The Armed.
I have not heard that.
Just check it out. It's like noise. It's like noise, rock, hardcore. It's a lot of different things. And almost every single one of the members of the band is like completely unknown and completely isolated. Like they're a collective, and they've got this whole thing of like, yeah, if you show up at a show with a guitar, you're in the band, sort of thing.
Oh wow, okay.
So it's
I'm gonna check it out now.
Yeah, it's definitely.
But I guess what the way that is like,
things
are they actually affecting society / culture?
I don't know. I wouldn't be the best person to ask. I'm so stuck in my own shit. But
here's the thing: is like, think back 10, 20, 30. I was talking to someone last night about David Bowie and like how he fucking busted his ass, and until he was able to put together the Ziggy Stardust thing, no one gave a shit about him because he put out Hunky Dory, which is an amazing album in retrospect. Nobody fucking cared.
I think it's because back then people were shocked by things. People would listen to music and something crazy would happen to get shocked by things.
Nothing shocks anyone.
Now people go into it expecting a shock and are disappointed when they don't receive one.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of the thing, and you become desensitized to it over time. Man. So yeah, definitely one of those things. But
we're old. This sucks.
Yeah, I feel super old. I got gray hair everywhere. So, but Joel, I hate to cut you short, man, but No, we're good. I have a feeling.
Fun talking, man.
Absolutely. Well, and I have a feeling that there's a lot more. So, you know.
Well, you and I will stay in touch. When my brain works and I can remember other stories, I'll make sure to send them to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't be a stranger, and you know we can absolutely do a part 2 anytime you want. So.
Hey, man, best of luck, and thanks for just taking the time to talk to me, and like, it was wonderful connecting with you and just telling you some silly stories from just weird random scene that happened when you and I were teens and 20s, you know.
100%.
Hey, here's to being old men, upright above ground still. You know what I mean?
Cheers.
Right on. Take care, brother.
Yep, you too.
This has been the Discuss Metal Podcast with Joel Bailey of Society's Finest. Presented by DiscussMetal.com.